I've been asked to critically evaluate the extent to which vertical integration is a realistic HR strategy for organisations. As a HR strategy, vertical integration is designed to ensure that the way a company manages its people is explicitly linked to the company's overall business strategy. I acknowledge that there are many forms of vertical integration that HR strategies support, but today I'm going to focus on cost reduction HR strategies associated with vertical integration and their implications on employees. In particular, I will draw on examples of shift workers and how their efforts are exploited to maximise companies' profit. The mainstream view of HR as a distinctive approach to employment management is not always delivered in practice when vertical integration is applied, but particularly when the HR practices are supporting cost reduction objectives. Explicitly, this is often at the expense of the employee's well-being. Schuler and Jackson explain strategic HRM in rational terms. They argue that all organisational competitive strategies are aimed at cost reduction, quality improvement and innovation, thereby reducing all successful competitive advantages into just 3 strategies for all organisations in any industry. Their human capital theory both assumes and explains organisation control of employees in order to achieve strategic goals. I would argue that this positivistic approach is limiting with its reductionist nature, especially in the context of social work such as care and hospital workers. When cost reduction strategies are enforced, human labour cuts are the first point of attention as a result of this. Smaller teams and staff are stretched across the same number of patients, and therefore patients are in danger of receiving a poor quality of care and morale within the team is affected. The capitalist view reducing competitive strategies to 3 objectives is not realistic for labour-intensive jobs. I do not think that cost reduction and quality improvement HR strategies can coexist to improve efficiencies. In fact, I think that this reflects the Marxist theories that organisational profit is achieved through the extraction of labour out of its employees. As a result of cost reduction HR strategies, there are implications for employees, and in particular, I'm going to focus on shift workers. Schwartz and Roth have reported that findings in research studies on labour-intensive shift work leads to implications for employees such as chronic sleep disorder. The negative consequences of shift work has established that recent evidence suggests that patients with shift work sleep disorder are increased risk of consequences and comorbidities. This is further supported by Schwartz and Roth, who reported case studies of shift workers with disrupted sleep, excessive sleepiness and fatigue. These implications often lead to performance impairment and diminished attentiveness that can affect job productivity. I would impose the question of cause and effect to the research findings of Schwartz and Roth. Is shift work sleeping disorder a result of shift work? Or do people with sleep disorders choose shift work because it is more appealing to their sleeping habits? Further research should be warranted to evaluate this question because we cannot assume that shift work is always the cause of sleep disorders.
So employees are often exploited for overwork and underpaid labour is the hospitality industry. In smaller companies, they often don't have a HR department and their business strategy is almost always cost reduction. Drawing from my own experiences in hospitality, this can lead to moral and ethical implications such as exploitation in the form of discrimination. I've personally experienced discrimination in the form of ageism. When I was working in a bar, I was paid weekly, cash in hand, and the hours worked were not recorded. It was simply my word versus my manager's. I was underpaid for the hours that I worked that week. And when I contested against this, the employer's argument was that the bar was quiet for the first few hours and that they weren't going to pay me because they hadn't made any profit. Now, of course, this encompasses many ethical arguments, but in relation to vertical integration, the nature of the industry means that the company is so far integrated that the managers are performing a variety of duties such as the finances, the HR and the payroll, that effectively this means there's no middle body to protect the employees from the employers. Now, in these small companies, this allows the employer to exploit the workers for the profit, for their profitable strategies. For instance, the majority of the team were young workers, and the knowledge and experience of the working rights were limited, meaning that the employer could use this to his advantage because the younger workers lacked confidence and the confidence to object if we ever felt exploited. in a variety of bars and restaurants and pubs, and it is often the case that employers will hire young, energetic individuals for the benefit of their company, because these individuals have their own agenda to work the longer hours and for lower wages, because some individuals are just happy to even have a job because of the lack of experience. Employers can exploit this for their own benefit for the organisation and their profitability.
Neoclassical theorist Hakim argues that individuals are heterogeneous and have free choice of work. Recent statistics have reported that women in particular are concentrated in the secondary labour sector, and in particular the care service industry. I would argue that this is because part-time and shift work accommodates for flexible working for family responsibilities, and therefore it is not their free choice to work in these occupations, and in fact it is a result of the capitalist construction of the labour market and lack of family-friendly HR policies that women are actually forced to choose these occupations as a lack of choice. In a similar vein, the rational choice theory argues that employees are aware of industry norms and cultures, but make the conscious decision to work in that industry. Particularly in hospitality, pubs, restaurants and independent businesses exhibit strong organisational cultures and friendly environments, which can make the industry more appealing. This is highlighted by this theory that individuals will actually make the conscious decision to work in these occupations, even though they are aware of the pitfalls such as unsociable working hours and shift work. In relation to Mayo, 1980, and his argument, social equilibrium and strong organisational cultures will achieve success, and organisational cultures can be achieved through a multiplicit concept of shared values, beliefs and norms. In the context of vertical integration, Mayo implies that employees' beliefs must be in line with the organisational strategy to achieve success. Well, this makes me question, is a HR strategy realistic to assume that employees will want to work long hours for minimum wage for the benefit of the company? Speaking from my own experience, my argument is no, this is not realistic, because my individual agenda for working longer hours was simply to make money, and it was not for the benefit of the company. Boxall, 1996, and other academics will argue that the best fit strategic HRM is the most effective strategy for organisational success. However, the notion of best fit is to tailor HR practices to the individual organisational objectives, effectively implying that vertical integration is realistic as a HR strategy. But this practice assumes that employees will want the same HR policies as the company. If we consider this in the context of those labour-intensive workers in healthcare industries, when the business strategy is cost reduction, this will mean working longer shifts and overtime for lower wages. But from the employee perspective, this is not their ideal working routine. Furthermore, the best fit approach assumes that all employees are motivated by the exact same HR practices. But if HR was truly focused on the well-being of their employees, they would adopt an individualistic approach to accommodate for individual needs. For example, some employees may want flexible working for family responsibilities, and others may desire to work overtime to accrue more money. Therefore, the best fit approach to strategic HRM is not realistic from the employee perspective. The mainstream view of human resource management is the management of people with the assumption that employers have the positive moral obligations towards their employees. However, HRM has a managerialist orientation when it is linked to vertical integration as a HR strategy. This is highlighted by Greenwood 2002, who argues HRM has moved away from the individualistic ideologies of employees, and now positivism is the dominant epistemological approach to HR strategies. In the context of vertical integration and employee well-being, I would argue that the further HR moves towards vertical integration as a strategy, the word management becomes a euphemism for use, in terms of the use of human labour to achieve an organisational strategy. Ultimately, it becomes the application of Kantianism, whereby the use of human labour is simply a means to an end, and HR practices are used to manage employees. This is also leveraged by the Marxist exploitation theory, drawing on conclusions that human labour is exploited to achieve organisational profit. Townley 1993 argues that HRM strategies are positivistic epistemologies, as HR practices are merely techniques to measure whether an employee is manageable or more explicitly, whether they are useful to the company. Performance of employees becomes reduced to measures, and the value of employees' skills contributions becomes an objective measure. I think it has become clear that vertical integration as a HR strategy raises many ethical issues for the well-being of its employees in certain industries, and the further HR strategies move towards vertical integration, there is a greater chance of exploiting human labour to achieve organisational profit.